In May of 2016, teenage friends Kevin Nguyen and TJ Cayetán visited the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And while they did see some art they liked, they were unimpressed when they came across a piece very similar to this one by the artist Mike Kelly. It's what it looks like. Stuffed animals arranged on a blanket. Kevin said later in an interview, "Is this really what you call art?" And TJ said, "We looked at it and we were like, this is pretty easy. We could make this ourselves." So they decided to play around a bit, placing a jacket on the floor and then a baseball cap to see if either would draw attention. Then one of them put his glasses on the floor underneath a wall label explaining the theme of the gallery and stepped aside. People started to gather around them, and someone even took pictures. TJ posted some pics to Twitter, and it started to spread. A couple days later, SF MoMA responded from their official Twitter, saying, "Do we have a Marcel Duchamp in our midst?" They were referring to Duchamp's series of works he called ready-mades, ordinary objects that he, the artist, designated to be works of art. The most famous of these is Fountain from 1917, a standard urinal of the time, turned on its side, signed and dated R. Mutt 1917, and put on a pedestal. Now the backstory here is important. Duchamp had arranged through a friend to submit this under a pseudonym to the newly established Society of Independent Artists, which he himself had helped found. The whole point of this society was that they'd accept whatever the members submitted, no matter what. Except when the board of directors saw Fountain, they said it could not be considered a work of art, that it was indecent, and then voted to exclude it from the show. Duchamp was furious, resigned in protest, and he and his friends got Fountain back, had it photographed by Alfred Stieglitz, and published the photos in a new journal they created. In it, the editors wrote, "Whether Mr. Mutt with his own hands made the fountain has no importance. He chose it. He took an ordinary article of life, placed it so that its useful significance disappeared under the new title and point of view, and created a new thought for that object." Exactly what Kevin and TJ were doing. In defense of Fountain, the poet Guillaume Apollinaire wrote in 1918, "The viewpoint of the Society of Independent Artists is evidently absurd, for it arises from the untenable point of view that art cannot ennoble an object." And that's a critical point here, because that's all art does, really. We take simple, everyday materials and subject them to transformations large and small, as large as making a blank piece of fabric into a painting, or as small as positioning an object in an art gallery. These transformations ennoble these materials, making them into something more than the sum of their parts. Like the glasses prank, Fountain was a test. In 1917, it was a test to see what the institutions of the time, even the most progressive ones, could bear. And it failed! They wouldn't exhibit it. It was in its rejection that the object slowly rose to fame. The original work was lost, but Duchamp sanctioned a number of replicas later on, after his own star had risen and the urinal story persisted in art historical memory. These replicas sit in museums around the world and still serve as a test, challenging each visitor to consider its legitimacy as a museum-worthy object. They continue to be good barometers for us as we think about what art is exactly, what it can be, and what we want it to be. There's a long history of artists not only performing in galleries, but also inviting participation in their work. Like Irvin Verm's one-minute sculptures, where he directs you to pose with an object or set of objects in a particular way. Artists like Klaus Oldenburg have long played with our expectations of what we're supposed to see when we walk into a gallery, or admire on the lawn of a museum. In 1969, Yanis Kounelis put 12 live horses into an art gallery in Rome. He's associated with arte povera, a movement defined by the use of humble materials drawn from everyday life but presented with a level of intensity that sets them apart, ennobling those materials, or in this case, horses.